Some days your mood arrives before your thoughts do. You wake up and something feels off. Nothing happened, no bad news, no argument, no tragedy. You slept, you got up, you went to make coffee. And the heaviness was already there. Like sadness woke up before you did. Most people will call that stress, or aging, or hormones, and sometimes it is. But neuroscientists have started investigating a different possibility. In some cases, the problem doesn't begin in the mind, it begins in the gut. And after 50, that conversation between the gut and the brain changes more than almost anyone was ever told it would. If you're over 50 and you've noticed your mood feels more sensitive, more unpredictable, harder to understand, this video is for you because maybe you've been interpreting biological signals as if they were only emotional ones. The science of mood has changed dramatically over the last 15 years. Today, researchers know that anxiety, irritability, sadness, tension, and even feelings of well-being don't depend only on your thoughts. They also depend on what's happening inside your body, especially inside your gut. And the strangest part of all is that sometimes the gut starts affecting mood before it causes any clear digestive symptoms. The brain feels it first. Today, 3 things. What scientists have discovered about the gut-brain axis, and why that relationship changes after 50. Why certain foods may affect your mood hours later without you realizing the connection. And one extremely simple observation that may begin revealing over the next 48 hours how your body has been talking to your mind without you noticing. For a long time, medicine treated the gut and the brain like separate departments. The brain thought, the gut digested. End of story. Today, we know that isn't true. Your gut has its own network of neurons so complex that many scientists call it the second brain, and it communicates with the main brain all the time. That communication happens through what's called the gut-brain axis, and it's constant, silent, and deeply biological. The first pathway in that communication is the vagus nerve, the largest nerve in the human body. It directly connects the gut and the brain. And here's something that surprised many researchers. A large portion of the signals traveling through that nerve move from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. Your gut sends emotional and physiological information to your brain all the time. The second pathway involves neurotransmitters and chemical substances related to mood. Even when you still don't notice any obvious digestive problems. Now comes the part that matters, especially after 50. The microbiome, the community of bacteria living in the gut, changes with age. Researchers have observed that bacterial diversity tends to decrease. The gut may become more sensitive. The intestinal barrier can change, and certain compounds associated with well-being become less abundant in some people. That doesn't mean disease, but it does mean change. And biological change alters biological communication. That's why people who spent decades eating the exact same foods suddenly begin noticing different effects. Not necessarily in the stomach, in the mood. A specific meal that leaves behind a strange sadness a few hours later. Coffee that now creates anxiety. Wine that used to relax you but now leaves you irritable the next day. A heavy meal that doesn't just create physical fatigue, it creates an emotional heaviness that's hard to explain. And most importantly, this isn't all in your head, it's in the body, and then it reaches the mind. Now, maybe some experiences from your own life start making more sense. Maybe you've lived through this without realizing it. You go out to lunch, you have a normal conversation, you come back home, and a few hours later, your mood feels strange. Not exactly sadness, not exactly anxiety, just an uncomfortable feeling that's hard to name, and you try to find an emotional explanation. Maybe it was the conversation. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe it's hormones. Maybe I'm becoming too sensitive. But maybe part of the story was happening in your gut. That's one reason so many people after 50 begin feeling like their own body has become more mysterious, because the signals change. The body you knew at 30 doesn't respond the same way at 55 or at 60. The gut absorbs differently. Sleep affects you differently. Sugar affects you differently. Alcohol affects you differently. Caffeine affects you differently. And mood begins reflecting those silent changes. That doesn't mean all sadness comes from digestion. Of course not. Emotions are still real. Stress still exists. Grief still exists. Psychological anxiety still exists. But there's an important difference between emotional suffering and biological suffering interpreted as emotional. And sometimes the two become so intertwined that you can no longer tell them apart. The sentence I want you to remember is this: sometimes what you call sadness has a name, and the name is biology. Not as a simplification, but as a broader way of looking at yourself. And here's why this matters so much. When you spend years believing every emotional discomfort comes only from the mind, you miss important information your body has been trying to give you. Afternoon irritability becomes stress. Anxiety after dinner becomes worry. Sadness after certain meals becomes fatigue. And sometimes that really is what it is. But other times, your body is trying to show you a pattern no one ever taught you how to notice. The problem isn't dramatic, it's silent. You keep making decisions about food, drinks, routines, and energy based on an incomplete understanding of yourself. And the most frustrating part, many of these patterns only become visible when someone finally teaches you to pay attention, not with obsession, not with paranoia, not by turning food into fear, just observation. And that detail changes everything, because body awareness reduces guilt. When you understand that part of your mood may be coming from biology, you stop turning every emotional fluctuation into a personality flaw. For decades, the default question in response to emotional suffering was, "What's bothering me?" And that question still matters. But maybe there's another question that was missing. What happened in my body over the last few hours? That question changes a lot because it transforms mood into observable information, not just emotional judgment. Researchers in health and neuroscience have been observing that many people after 50 begin identifying surprising patterns when they connect food and emotional state throughout the day. Some discover certain foods increase tension, others notice emotional crashes after too much sugar. Others realize alcohol now affects their mood much longer than it used to. Others notice anxiety connected to caffeine that never existed before. None of this is universal. Every body responds differently. The point here is not to start eliminating foods, not to jump into extreme diets, not to become afraid of food. The point is to recover body awareness. Because many people spend decades disconnected from these signals, and when they finally begin observing, they realize part of their emotional life may have been influenced by something far more physical than they imagined. So here's the simple experiment. Over the next 48 hours, observe your mood after meals. That's it. You finish eating? Notice how you feel. Energy, tension, irritability, lightness, anxiety, mental clarity. Then check in again 2 or 3 hours later. Did something change? You're not looking for someone to blame. You're looking for patterns. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe you discover a very clear connection. Maybe you notice certain meals leave behind an emotional residue in your day. No judgment, no self-diagnosis, no obsession, just listening. Because this is the delicate part of this stage of life. Sometimes the body speaks more quietly than it used to. And that's exactly why so many people stop hearing it. Most of us grew up hearing that mood was purely psychological, or weakness, or personality, or stress. But science has evolved. Today we know the brain, gut, immune system, inflammation, sleep, and nutrition are deeply connected. The whole body participates in mood, and after 50, that connection often becomes more sensitive. Understanding that doesn't turn you into someone obsessed with health. It turns you into someone with more context about yourself. And context reduces guilt. Maybe you spent years believing you were emotionally difficult, when part of what was happening was silent biology. Maybe not all of it, but part of it. And understanding that already changes the relationship you have with yourself, because there's a very deep relief in realizing that not every emotional fluctuation means your mind is failing. Sometimes the body is simply trying to communicate. And maybe nobody ever taught you that language before. The sentence I want to leave you with is simple. Sometimes what you call sadness has a name, and the name is biology, not as an excuse, not as a simplification, but as an invitation to widen your perspective. And remember that sometimes mood doesn't begin in the mind, it begins in the body. If this video helped you understand your body in a different way, maybe you're beginning to realize that aging well isn't just about living longer. It's about finally understanding signals no one ever taught you how to interpret. Here on the Second Half Blueprint, we talk about the brain, the body, emotions, and aging with science, but also with humanity. Subscribe to the channel to continue this conversation. New videos every Monday. And tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed days when your mood seemed to come from your body before your thoughts did? I read every comment.